Numbers. Why Ken's wrong. Numbers enthrall Ken Wheeler in various ways. Find out how the angry photographer has misconstrued symbolic cultural numerology, and why his pronouncements on the topic amount to nothing more than a numbers racket. There's nothing more human than numbers. We've always used numbers to keep tallies of things like time, seasons, or how many animals there are in a herd. Numbers and symbols go together. Numbers seem to trigger deeper meanings and a sense of connection to the world around us. The meanings we apply to numbers, like 7 being lucky or 13 being unlucky, vary significantly between cultures. Even so, a number's properties can trigger societies to interpret it similarly. Ken Wheeler has concocted his own peculiar number system. He bases it on his devotion to so-called perennial philosophy and to an obscure pattern that mathematicians call the Fibonacci sequence. Ancient civilizations had symbolism for numbers from 1 to 9. Let's compare Egyptian, Hebrew, Greek, and Hindu cultural numerology. Predictably, 1 stands for unity across cultures. It's the number of the beginning for Egyptians, Yahweh for Hebrews, the Absolute for Greeks, and Brahman for Hindus. 2 represents duality or division throughout the ancient world. It reminded Egyptians of Upper and Lower Egypt, the Hebrews of one person testifying to another, the Greeks of the dyad, and the Hindus of nature blended with consciousness. 3 related to multiplicity and harmony. The Egyptians and the Hindus connected it to trinities of their gods, while the Hebrews called it completion, and the Greeks thought of the musical harmony of 3 notes forming a chord. 4 was an essential number in all ancient cultures, signifying completion and stability. The Egyptians saw it in the 4 directions. The Hebrews linked it to creation. The Greeks saw it in their 4 elements, and the Hindus tied it to their 4 scriptures, the Vedas. The New Testament has 4 Gospels for similar reasons. 5 represented the human body with its trunk and 4 limbs, and the hands 5 fingers. The Egyptians used a sacred hand gesture for it. The Hebrews related it to redemption. The Greeks thought of it as the human microcosm, and the Hindus saw it in their 5 elements. 6 meant creation and perfection. The Egyptians saw it as balance and harmony. The Hebrews tied it to the 6th day of creation when God made humans. The Greeks called it the hexad, and the Hindus believed in 6 realms. 7 meant spiritual perfection in the West, while in Asia it stood for the body's 7 chakras. The Hebrews thought of God creating the universe in 7 days, and the Greeks called it the spiritually perfect heptad, and nearly all Westerners consider it lucky. 8 meant rebirth or regeneration in the ancient world. The Hindus believed in 8 forms of wealth. 9 stood for the end or finality, because it's the last single-digit number. The Hindus connected it with the planets. The angry photographer offers his own eccentric numerical system. He claims it comes from the Fibonacci sequence, along with his distorted reading of Iamblichus's Theology of Arithmetic. As we explained under Golden Ratio Why Ken's Wrong, Fibonacci published his sequence in 1202 CE. There's no evidence that anyone in the ancient world had ever heard of it. The Fibonacci sequence works like this. 0 plus 1 equals 1, 1 plus 1 equals 2, 1 plus 2 equals 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5, and 3 plus 5 equals 8, and so on. So the single-digit numbers that start the sequence are 1, 1, 2, 3, 5, and 8. According to Ken Wheeler, 1 isn't a number. Apparently 10 and 0 don't count as numbers either. The angry photographer calls the first one in the sequence the principle. He claims the second one represents the attribute. Then he tries to equate this second one with the ratio phi, even though phi's value is 1.618, etc., and not 1. Ken Wheeler goes on to assert that the Fibonacci sequence reveals the original trinity. He comes up with 3 groups for the first 5 numbers: 1, 1, 2, 3, and 5, without explaining why he pairs some numbers, but not others. The angry photographer says 2 and 3 mean magnitude and matter, and 5 means spiritual being. The ancients associated the number 5 with our physical body, not with spirituality. The angry photographer fixates on the missing number 4. Supposedly, 4 meant time and death. The number 4 meant completion and stability, as in the 4 directions and the 4 seasons. It wasn't tied to death, certainly not in the West. In some Chinese dialects, the word for 4 and death sounds similar. Some Chinese cultures consider 4 unlucky, but this isn't a widespread superstition or interpretation. The Theoria Apophasis host claims he's made an earth-shaking discovery about 6. He conflates it with excess and evil. Apparently, counting to 6 goes too far. Kentucky Ken also insists that the number 666 represents the word excess. The ancient Greek word for excess is hybris, from which we get the English word hubris, and it has nothing to do with the number 6. Excess comes from the Latin word excedere, which means to go too far, and it's unrelated to the Latin word for 6, sex. The number 666 comes from the biblical book Revelation. It does have a hidden meaning. It spells out the name of Emperor Nero, whom Christians despised. 6 and excess are unrelated terms. Moving on to 7, Kentucky Ken says it represents the wisdom gained through the debunked magic of theurgy. Its standard connection is to God creating the world in 7 days. Luckily for us. All of this quirky numerology seems to stem from the angry photographer's aversion to mathematics, combined with his resentment of his regrettable academic experiences. Of course, none of that justifies appropriating traditional culture's symbolism around numbers, or recasting it in his own image. In the end, Ken Wheeler's approach to numerical symbolism is just another numbers racket.